everybody. Thank you so much for being here. And Wayne, thank you, and Rachel too, for pulling this all together. And you know what, for having me here to introduce myself and my family memoir, Adore Their Hearts. This is my husband right over here, Jeff. And we took a lot of this journey together, you know, and I'm happy to have him by my side still, even though I drove him a little bit crazy, baby. I'm honored to be here honoring the president, you know, and also my family legends, because you can't forget them, the Ferro of Waltham. And I feel them very much with me this evening. And that's what you want, right? That's why we do what we do. I look forward to your questions after the presentation, and please take your refreshments and enjoy them during the presentation. And I'd like to thank my cousin Sally for baking. She made her mother's Italian cookies and my aunt's bow tie cookies and bow ties. And my husband also made a apple ciabatta. So please have at it, enjoy. And thank you for all whoever set up the coffee. That was really nice of you too. Thanks so much. So let's start with my book cover, okay? Everybody take a look at the screen, all right? The book cover is a photograph I captured in Korea. It's the front door of my grandfather's childhood home. My grandfather's name, by the way, Ferro. In America, they called him Joseph or Joe, but in my heart, I prefer to call him Giuseppe. The two people that are on the cover are my great grandparents and his parents, Antonina Lembo and Carmelo Ferro. You can see I didn't use my computer, but I saw them. Those two people are very much a part of my book as well. You know, I want to tell you a little bit about, just a little synopsis. The main story really is about how I got to know my grandparents. And this means a lot to me because I never met my grandfather. He died before I was born. And my grandmother died when I was 6. So I had no idea who these people really were. But, you know, I turned 50 years old and then all of a sudden it was like, I better know this stuff, you know, and how come I don't? And I don't feel Sicilian. Why don't I feel Sicilian? Well, because I'm in America and they just didn't want you to feel Sicilian in America. So a lot of the things I needed to go back to Sicily to figure out. So my husband and I, we went together. We went, and you can go ahead to the next one, Jeff, thank you. Okay, so I traced my grandparents back to their birthplaces, all right? And how I did that was I was in Ellis Island. I was at Ellis Island, both of us, and we were on the little kiosk, and you know, they tell you where they're from, and I knew my grandmother was from Bronte, but I didn't really know where my grandfather was from until I started getting interested. So I saw her on there in Korea that he came in, you know, his record from Ellis Island. And I said, okay, so Korea, I have to go see, you know, and I also have to go to Bronte. So that's, we did trace them to their birthplaces. Bronte is where my grandmother was born, like I said. And Bronte is right here. We were staying in Taormina, right here. So we had to go around Mount Etna. This is the volcano. So that is Bronte right there, to her place. And you see where this red dot is? That's where the Korea is. Okay, a lot of you may already know this because it sounds like a lot of you were already doing a lot of investigating into that area. So Korea is where my grandfather was born, and that's you know, so that's how I started there. Well, what happened is I got to Bronte. This is the first time. We got to Bronte, and all I had with me was Angelina's baptism certificate from the Trinity Church. Sally, you gave me that, remember you had that in the keepsakes. So I had that, and I went by the seal. That's how I found the Trinity Church. So every little document that you have to look at all the details, you know, to really, there's something on there that can move your research. There is something. So you just have to keep looking. That was the seal that got me to finding the Trinity Church, okay? So a man named Giuseppe and his wife, this is important, they helped us find the church because I knew the church. I just really didn't know Bronte. So this man helped us, but the church was closed. So I got to, which was really amazing, stand in front of the church at least, and just kind of feel, you know, my grandmother and, you know, that this was where she was, that this was the city she was born in, and this is the church she was baptized in. So I, you know, it wasn't until 2 or 3 trips back that I got to go into it. You know, the same thing happened to the town hall. It happened to be a holiday that day, a religious holiday. Do you know how many religious holidays they have over there in Sicily or in Italy? It's like every week there's one. So you never, unless you know their holiday system, which I do much better now, you know, having more knowledge. But so the town hall was closed. I couldn't even go into that. But like I said, 2 or 3, the second and third trips back, I got what I came for. And finally, after 109 years in hiding, a family mystery was solved. Right, Sally? A family mystery. So you'll have to read what it was, because I have to leave some little, you know, just some little, what do they call, carrots. You gotta wag your carrots a little bit, right, Chuck? So I know you ancestry geniuses are thinking, all that distance 3 times for records that I could have gotten online, right? But you know what I couldn't get online? I couldn't get the experience of being in Sicily. I couldn't walk on the homeland of my grandparents from the computer, right? Okay, so yeah, there's necessary things that you gotta do. And one of those necessary things for me was getting my butt to Sicily. I got there that I could ask questions, and although there's dialect there, in every single part of Sicily, you go to Bronte, it's different than if you go to Korea, and you know, have the basic Italian. No Italian, I mean, no English too. So they were able to help me figure things out in English that I couldn't figure out in, you know, Italian. But the older people, they really don't. They don't have any knowledge of the English language at all. So you're going over there solidly dependent on yourself, you know, and all this gentleman was great to help us. So there's a lot of land between, if you see there, between Bronte and Korea. Okay, so on a horse and donkey, it probably took days, right? So my grandfather Giuseppe worked and boarded there in Bronte. All right, that's how he and Angelina met. Now, of course, I didn't find this all out right away. I didn't know any of this stuff. This was all through research that I dug this up, okay? And talking to people too, which I'll get into. People that are family. They married and raised 2 children there, all right? Out of the 9 children that they had, 2 of them were born in Sicily, in Bronte, okay? So it took me going back there that many times to find this information, and a lot more information. And you know, the whole time that I was there, I felt like my aunts and uncles and my mom, they were with me. They were with me for so much of the journey. It was beautiful. It was at first a little odd feeling, but I really felt them. And that's how interested I was in getting into doing this. I fell heart and soul into it. It became a real labor of love for me. So every single bit of information I found I would like just jump up and down, right, Jeff? And I'd be so happy. And, you know, to somebody who maybe works at the Genealogical Society would be like, yeah, that's good. But for me, it was great. So let's see, let me get back to here. So Ukria, okay, Ukria is, Jeff, you could go to Ukria now. Oh, that's actually Mount Etna. So we can skip that, sorry, I passed right through that. Okay, so Ukria is all the way up in the Brody Mountains. I don't know how many of you know that. Has anyone been to Ukria here? No? Okay, sorry. Seeing the light, oh, you have, awesome. It's beautiful. It's just one town shy of the tip, you know, so you're going pretty much to the top. Ironically, you're not going to believe this, another man named Giuseppe volunteered to help us that day. And who was I looking for all that time? My Giuseppe, right? So I thought there's something, you know, really ironic about this, that these two Giuseppes are helping me find my Giuseppe. You know, this is poetic. So it all felt right. It felt like, yep, I'm made to do this. This is why I'm here. So, you know, they weren't even residents, by the way, of these places. The second Giuseppe, he was a resident, but had moved to Australia and his family, and he used to come back to be with his friends for the summer. So we were there in September. He happened to be there late on his vacation, and he helped us. And it turns out the other Giuseppe was actually a German whose wife lived there at one time, and they were vacationing too. So it was like, these people just showed up when I showed up. So it was kind of cool, you know, like I said, it was really poetic all over the place. Ukria's name is from the Arabic, it's pronounced Kurya, okay? It's K-E-R-Y-A, like Kenya, but with an R instead of an N. That's its Arabic name, all right? And that means village, which it definitely is. It's a small village. There's 1,000 people, about 1,000 people in Sicily, in Ukria. It's surrounded by lush green mountains everywhere you look. And also past the mountains, you definitely see the sea. Jeff, you can go to the next one. Okay, so right there, you're looking, all right, this is Ukria in the winter, first of all. Okay, and we're facing north here. So you're looking at the Tyrrhenian Sea, the Tyrrhenian Sea, and the Aeolian Islands in the background. And it's a little foggy right there, but you can see almost every one of them. So it's a beautiful setting. If you haven't been, it's definitely a trip you'll never forget. And Jeff, you go on to the next thing. Okay, so right here, this right here is all the architecture that you'll find. This is Arabic architecture. It occupied at one time, Ukria was occupied by the Arabs and also by Latins and Byzantine Greeks and Normans. So the whole little village boasts very diverse architecture. So, like I said, right here is the Arabic that has the angles and the embellished, finishes. And if you see the tower right there, the clock tower, that was built by the Arabics by the Arabs, sorry, and they used that as the lookout tower to the sea. Okay, so they were looking out. Don't forget, they were there during times of wars and all kinds of things going on. So the Roman, you can switch down here. Thank you. The Roman Byzantine squares and circles and shapes, and then when we go on to the Norman, this is the Norman. All right, that is the semicircular arches and the cylinder pillars, and those are very much the Norman architecture. You can take the next one, Jen. Okay. These are the residence areas, and these are a little less ornate, okay? But they still have ornaments, like you'll see, you know, you can see the, all this here, okay, beautiful ironwork. And then, of course, you have just here is your column, you know, your pillar. And it's just simply decorated all these areas. Can you see right here, there's just a little underpass right there. Just some really cute little things. They're ancient, you know, these things are very old. And the one thing I really respect about the Korea is they won't just like take something down and put something new there. You know how we do that, right? They don't believe in that at all. So it's kind of nice to see the old. So when you're going there, you're not going to see anything new. If you're looking for new, it's not the place to go. But if you're looking to really understand, you know, old Sicily, it's a great place to go. So let's see, let's go to the next one. Okay, right here, okay, on the left, there's a note from the archives with Ukria's seal, okay? My Uncle Charlie had to get his father's birth record for him. They needed it for his hospital stay in 1946. You see it? You see 1946 on the letter right there. So that's when it was given. I didn't understand what this letter was all about and why it said 1946 until I did the research, found my grandfather's records, and realized, oh, okay, yep, it all pieced together. You know, it's a puzzle. Everyone knows that it's a puzzle. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And then the information, I'm sorry, on the next one, on the right, this is a ledger for 1875. Because on that letter over there, it says he was born on 29 October 1875. So that meant when I went there, it was going to be in this ledger right here. Okay. So it wasn't in the correct spot though. And so you have to figure, how come he was born on the 29th? Okay. So why isn't it on the 29th? And you know, you're there. It took us a long time to get to Korea. It's not an easy ride. We got a little lost. So you're tired. And then they tell you that this is not there. That's impossible. So she was very good, our little archives administrator. She was very persistent and she looked further. And what she did, and I'll show you on the next one. Go ahead, Jeff. This is his record, okay? So I'm going to teach you a little bit about deciphering Italian here, okay, on a record. This is actually Italian and Latin, okay, because they used the Latin language a lot. But in the red, you see, I did this so that you could really understand. A lot of people will look at that section right there that says, Nano 1875, which means it's the year, what year? Anyone know? 1875, okay? So, 1875 is 1875. On the third, this is 31st, 31st of October. So he didn't show up until 2 days after the baby's birth, after Giuseppe's birth, to register him. So that's why, if you know you have somebody's birthday and they can't find it, that's a good reason why. Because they didn't rush. In America, they were worse. They were much worse. They didn't show up for a whole month. And it would be, oh, the month is closing, we better get there. So, you know, and then it was really difficult because especially in Waltham, I knew their information. So I thought that was kind of interesting. The green part right there, I should just keep this in my hand, shouldn't I? All right, comparso means appears, So he appears, who appears? Carmela or Ferro Carmela, okay? So that's his father, all right? Usually the fathers did, but a lot of times if they didn't, it was said, okay? So how old was he? 48. He was 48, and he was a contadina, which is a farmer, okay? He domiciled in Ucrea, okay? Which we knew, a lot of times they tell you that that means that they were actually always also born in Ucrea. So that can be helpful to you if you're wondering, well, where was the parent born? So these records can tell you that. So far you have comparso, which is who stands in front of them. And who are they standing in front of, by the way? I forgot to tell you, this is the registrar's name. They take that. This stuff right here isn't as important. This is the minutes that they came in, the hour and the minutes. That's unless you really need to know that. You don't really need to know that. So and then we have here that he was standing in front of him. He was 48 years old, and he was a farmer from Ucrea. Okay, so now this part right here says that Giuseppe, 6:15. Now it also says 6:15 in the morning. Oh no, this says auntie. Let me read it. Yeah, I did this here so I could read it better. At 6:15, and don't forget, they do the clock that goes 24-hour clock, okay? But I was told back then, they didn't necessarily do that. So some records did, some did not. It depended on your registrar. So be careful of that too. You gotta know if it's AM or PM. And this right here, this word here, spirante, that one right there means, and again, I would have this memorized before, that means the mentioned month. So it's talking about October, okay? The mentioned month, all right? And then, where are we here? At Via Portello. Okay, Via Portello was his birthplace, but there's no number. I do now know that number is 58. Okay, but it took some getting that, which you'll understand. And this is the mother's name right here, from Lembo Antonina, okay? And she was I'm sorry, I wrote it down, I can't see it on the screen, so. She was a spinner, okay? And also his legal wife who lives with him. That's what this says, okay? So she was
legal wife.
That's the wife, legal. Beatrice is a spinner, okay? And I'll go over all those terms in a little bit, all right? And she resided with him, him, okay? So that's what you get out of that record. And the child born was masculine, okay, male, okay? And he was presented as Giuseppe. So that tells you everything right there, okay? That's a neat record. You know why it's neat? Because at some point, because I have records that are all handwritten completely, even this stuff. But I can even go through them now that I know all this, what they say. I can even go through them and say, oh yeah, I can pick out that lettering, that's that word, okay? But these type records were great because they took that work away from you. The handwritten records, which I have some of them from my greats, you had to decipher everything, from the beginning to the end. This is nice because there's lines and typed and, the whole bit. So it makes it easier. So your records that came a little bit later in the 1800s, instead of like the early 1800s, looked like this. So, well, they should. That's what they said. All right. Oh, I had a lot of questions for a lot of people, and I know I would drive them crazy saying, yeah, but why this? I want to know why. All right. So, let's see. So now, Jeff, you can turn that, please. So you all understand that pretty much? Good. All right. So right here, this is my grandfather's childhood home. This is Via Portello, number 58. Okay. And this is the house that's left right there. You see over here how we have these little square holes? Those are for beams. They have the beams going through them. Okay. There's a whole section of Lucrea that is nothing but abandoned homes. And these, these homes are left there because it's the community's way of honoring them and honoring the people who they say had to immigrate. They had to survive. That's what they say. And they do a great job over there of really respecting that kind of stuff. Jeff, the next one. So you notice that that door had an arch, okay? That's called a sopra finestra, which is an above window, okay? Sopra meaning above, finestra meaning window. So that's what they call that. And that's the wrought iron grill, and it has 9 hearts altogether. You see 5 facing upright, but you see 4 facing down. Do you see it? Okay, 9 hearts. I have 9 Ferro legends in my life. So I saw that, and the goosebumps just went crazy. And these are 9 daggers. So just the whole 9 aspect of it, I would go out there when I was staying there, and I would go out there and look at it, just stare at it, and just be amazed at how I ended up. Now, the 9 hearts could have meant, or the 5 hearts, or the 4 hearts, whatever, could have meant something else to somebody, but to me, that's what it meant. That's how much my heart was into it. So, everybody sees something different. My cousin Debbie went there and she picked out other little things too. There's also an FA right here that we can't figure out what it is, and I'm trying to find out from the, ironworks people. Don't forget, artists always left their names on things or initials. So that's my thought. But the F is a Ferro, and somewhere in the line we could have had like an Antonino, because we have Antoninos. So it's a name that has been carried forward. So it could have been carried forward from way back when this house and this thing was built for, So those are questions that you have. And Jeff can go to the next one because I have a question for everybody. Okay, so what's your theory on this little door right here? Anyone have a theory on the little door? It's just you and I couldn't walk through it. Anybody know what that could be? That's part of the house. That's number 60. That's part of the house. I don't know.
Some people had animals.
Yeah, actually, some people said that a lot of times they leave their cow in there, because you're getting straight milk and all that from it. So that's, that's what they come up with, but nobody really knows the answer for sure. But again, that part of the house, that door is a mystery. Yeah, but this part of the house, again, is the square poles for beams, and those beams went to, for whatever floors they needed or ceilings they needed, or, but this is what you see every time you go back. It doesn't change. Okay. So, hold on one second. All right, you can take the next one, Joe. This is Chiesa Madre. Chiesa Madre is the mother church. It's St. Peter the Apostle. So this church right here is my family, Sally, yours too, our family church, and Brendan. And it's one of 10 churches in Lucrea. For 1,000 people, that's a lot of churches. And guess how many of them are Catholic? All of them, there you go, all of them. Jeff actually asked that question.
They thought I was nuts.
They thought that he was crazy, you know, well, of course. But you know, you forget, you're here in America, where you share this country with so many people, you know, and, you know, not everybody's Catholic. So it was an interesting question to ask, and I know that I would have, but. My great grandparents married me, okay, so Antonina and Carmelo married there. I found their record. And actually went to the church and spoke with the priest, and he helped me find the records. It was an amazing experience. Father Carmelo was no longer with him anymore. So it was really special for me that I got to have that time. He was such a gentle soul, really beautiful person. So he helped me find all these records I'm mentioning and much more. Also, Giuseppe and his brothers were baptized there too. I have those records as well. Their mother's funeral service was there. Antonina died young. She was in her 40s, like early 40s. And Giuseppe hadn't yet turned 5 years old when his mother died. And it had a lot to do, you know, with things that happened to him in his life, I think. Well, I'll get closer to telling you about that in a bit. I don't want to get astray too much because then it gets crazy. All right, so the next one, this is called the Piazza of the Emigrante, all right, the square of the immigrants. And this is a little dedication they had here. And this right here is a bronze statue of an immigrant with a satchel over his shoulder and a suitcase. It looks more like a briefcase to me, but they meant it to be a suitcase. So, you know, this is how much it meant to them that these people left them. And because they had to leave them, like this says right here at the bottom, you know. So read that. Jeff, want to read it?
To all the crazy immigrants in Italy and in the world, to who with dignity and courage had to leave their homeland in search of a better future. To all of those that, full of nostalgia, continue to carry Ucria in their heart.
Right. So wherever they went in the world, they just hope that they carried them. And you know, I hope they did too. I know I do. That date down there, August 14, 2011, that's the day I turned 50 years old, and that's the day I started my research. Is that the craziest? Right? So I feel like I should have seen that. You know, and I'm glad I did. And we visit this monument all the time. And it's, like I said, it's amazing how much respect they pay. You know, you think they would be like, oh yeah, they went to America. No, you hear that sometimes. So you, oh yeah, they're traders, they went to America. They knew they had to go, and we'll talk about why. All right, so the other amazing thing that I found here, go ahead, Jen, were newfound cousins. I had no idea that I had cousins there. Orchestrated by the kind workers in the town hall, and Jeff can tell you this, these women were sort of like talking to each other, and they were on the phone, and what they were doing was they were trying to contact my cousin Nina, okay, and let them know that an American cousin was in town. Well, that I felt like Dorothy in Munchkin Land over there, because you know they say, oh, and America, she says, is the name of the place. So I'm thinking to myself, this really feels like a movie. It doesn't feel. I kept saying to him, pinch me, tell me that this is real, because too many beautiful things were happening to me in this one day that started out so miserably. And all of a sudden it just turned beautiful. So this is Nino and his family, and we have been there 3 times already, and we communicate with them. I communicate with them daily, especially his wife, Maria Rita. Let me show you all that. So this is his sister, Jessapina, okay, which I know well now too, and her husband, Filippo. And then that's Jeff right there. Day online. And then this is their son, Marco. They have another son too, who wasn't there that day, Dario. He lives in Turin. And then this is another cousin. This is Nino's brother, hello, Joe, and his wife, to Pina, or Jessica, as they call her, Pina. And this is the gentleman, Giuseppe, that I was telling you about. He's the Australian, well, used to be one. So basically, we were there. They didn't understand English. I understood just a little, just enough to get by, but I was in a daze. If it wasn't for Jeff, who knew no Italian at all, just kind of carrying on. Somehow he could understand it, as I'm in a daze, the pinch me type of daze. But, you know, I came to, but it was pretty amazing. So, you know, I'm glad that we still keep up. But after that, this is what happened to me. This is when it hit me. After that, I'm like, how many others are there? If they're here, how many others? Well, it turns out that most of the Ferro did leave. You know, they did leave the Korea. But there are some there, but not anybody that really.
Generations.
Yeah, right, exactly. So it's just fun to have them and getting to know them. So now, Jeff, you go to so that, I told you, that kind of got me thinking, okay? So what I started to do was discover Ferro records. This is when I went to see, I got home and I was all excited and I called, you know, this woman named Rhonda McHugh over at the Genealogy Society in New England, whatever it's called. New England Historical Genealogical Society, it's a mouthful. So I called her, I said to her, look, I want to do this research myself. I really want my hands in it, my feet in it. I want to walk that land as much as I can, even from, you know, sitting down. So I want to do it. You know, it's just, you can pick somebody to do it for you, but it's not the same. So she taught me how to do it. I went to her, I paid, I think it was like $160. It cost me more money to park that day in a garage than it did for the session. So I learned so much from her, and I was able to find these records and know what I was looking for, like I showed you. And so you have the houses, I call them in the book, it's Il Cuore del Ferro is the name of the chapter. And what I do is I found all the records. I had a table full of a bunch of records that ended up in piles and more piles and, you know, taller piles. And these were all the family members that went together into that house. And don't forget, they lived together too. Generations lived together. They didn't have a lot of choice though. They were poor, really poor. So they lived together. So Carmelo at Via Portello is that was the one you saw. So that story right there, you'll read it and see how everything evolved. I talk about the records, even in the book. Do you have a book handy? You'll see that I put the numbers. Jeff, can you give me a book? You know what? I have my own book. Hold on. I have my book that's all marked up. But what I did for Il Cuore del Ferro, you got that? Oh, thank you. Thanks. That book is kind of embarrassing. That's my book that I do all stuff in, because I do, you know, well, I was doing a lot more before the COVID. I was doing a lot more talking about the book. And so Il Cuore del Ferro, give me a page. I want to just show you 134. So on 130, so what you'll notice, I'll just use this page. Here. Okay, so when I'm talking about a family, and I'm gonna tell you the records that I found and where I found them. So in other words, I don't want to lose your place. That's okay, don't worry about it. So so this here will say the year, all right, so 1822. It was a marriage record, so it says matrimony, and it gives the number of the record, numero 4. So that made it kind of easy, right? So that if you wanted to go and look at that record, you would go into the 1822 marriages and you would go to record number 4 and you would find that record. But good luck trying to read it because it's all hand. If that was in 1822. So that was a tough record to read. But that's how I did this to help people, because if you could get something from my information too, great. You know, why not? We have to help each other, right? That's why we're in this. We're in it together. So it was really important for me to, you know, to write that all that stuff down. I was pretty proud of it too. And I had 7 houses that, you know, had a story, and every person in that house had a heart. And that's where I came up with the Door to Their Hearts, you know, a Ferro Family memoir, because every person in that family, you understood their stories because of the stories around them. You know, somebody died in the family. Well, you know what? That's not easy, you know? So, you know, a parent dies or a child dies. I can't tell you how many parents I just could see with just pools, these, you know, of tears. And it's amazing when you get into the, you know, the real records that you make up, you know, these real stories come together, you know, and this is based on all the information. And some of the records get more detailed. I'll talk to you about that. Okay, so we got that right there. All right, and now we are at the crazy surnames. Yes. So take a look at this and tell me, does anybody notice the surname? I know we're going. But do you see any surnames that are yours?
About 25.
Oh, yeah, right, exactly. Okay, so I have to ask you this. The name Didio. Yeah, the name Didio appeared often in the registers. How many of you noticed that if you did the work? Did you do that? Okay, so Didio means a goddess. I thought to myself at first, how cool is that? Of God, their last name is of God. That's really cool. Well, it's not really cool. The spaces for the parents' names were always filled with the same parent's name, Ignoti. Ignoti means unknown. So what I was looking for these children of God, these were foundlings, okay? So when you stumble upon foundlings, you know, because you're reading these registers and they don't belong to your family, but you're still going through the registers anyway and getting to know these families, and you see the Proietti, there's another one, Proietti. Proietti is, I don't think, did I put this on there? Proietti, I don't think so, because I knew by that time that a Proietti is a project, which meant the child, you know, was now going to be the state's project, okay? Trovato, do you know anybody with the name Trovato? Last name Trovato? Trovato is found. A lot of times what happened is they would find these babies in these baskets or these little crates somewhere, and that's what these are, some of these names. So if you look at a name and you have your little, you know, translator, look up what the name means. And if it means something that is on the idea of, you know, lost or found or, you know, given up, what is Esposito? Esposito, that's one, Esposito. So a lot of these people, what happens is these children are given these names and so is everybody else after them. Well, this got really difficult for a lot of people because as they got older, they were known as, you know, bastards or whatever, because, you know, that's a lot of reasons why the parents gave up the children, because they were born out of wedlock and that was a no-no. So they felt terrible that they had, you know, that stigma to their names. So they actually protested and they ended up having a new law that was adopted that instead of naming them something like that, that was, you know, kind of derogatory, right? they would maybe do a city or a little town somewhere that, you know, in Sicily or in Italy, and they would name them that last name. Or if they found the child, let's just say in a field, you know, the child would have the last name, you know, Field. So a lot of I have my great aunt is one that adopted one of these proyections, and she was found in under an orange tree. So she was given, it was a blossom tree, a blossom that and this spola or something like that. It's in the book, and I thought that was just really interesting that they would do that. And how are we going to know that, right? How do you know that unless you dig deep? How many of you knew this? Did you know it? Yeah. So you know, until you dig deep and you find these answers, you know, nobody knows better. So I thought that was an interesting thing. And again, it was one of those joyful moments that Jeff would be like, yeah, that's, well, actually, you thought that was pretty cool too, right? How many of you have heard of the revolta? Does anyone know what the revolta is? The wheel. A revolta means wheel. Has anyone heard of the wheel?
Yeah.
Okay. You know what it is?
Yeah.
Okay. It's in some churches and midwives' homes, they had a wheel. Okay. Picture. All right. And it lay flat. All right. And the axle was wedged between, you know, the walls of the outer wall of the house. Half of the wheel would be inside and half of it would be out, and it would spin. And what they would do is the parents, the nonni, okay, they would put the child inside. There were the little cradles inside, and they would put the child into the cradle and then ring a bell and push it so that it went inside. And then the you know, they would hide, they would leave, and they would watch and make sure the baby was taken. And that's how they remained, you know, anonymous. That's how they did it. So, okay, great, you got that. All right, so we have that. I also want to show you too, before we do that my cousin Kalotaro, he bought me this book, and it's got currently all the names that are in Korea. You'll see all the surnames. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So if you can look at that, if you want to look at that later, you're welcome to. Okay, so let's talk about the occupations. All right, so you have your farmers of Contadina, which you saw on when Carmelo went for his son's spur. Farm hands are braccianti. Okay, shepherds are pecoraio, and then you have your shearers, which are tossatori, and then you have your spinners, which are filatrici or filandira. Either one. Fila means line or thread. Okay, so whenever you see anything that says, you know, with the fila, you know it has something to do with the line or thread. Or weavers, tessatori or tessatrice. The women have the trice. Okay, the men have the ore. Tailors, sacchi. If you're a seamstress, you're sacche. Cobblers, calzolaio, or, and these are, by the way, io would be a singular. So calzolai is plural. All of these are plural because they end in I. Or E for the women. So that's something else you learn. Where are shopkeepers, bottegai, you've heard of bodegas, right? So bottegai, those are your shopkeepers, and then your barbers are barbiere, your midwives are levatrice, they pull it out of you. Undertakers are becchini, and it sounds like bikini, but it's becchini. See the CH over there, CHI is pronounced chi. Okay, not chi. Chi is CI. All right, so wet nurses, which are very common because any of these babies that they took, these nuns or these midwives, they would need wet nurse. So they would hire the women. They could find, either put them in an orphanage or find an adoptive home. But in the meantime, the baby was getting nourished. Because if you always had a mother who just had a baby and who was nursing. So it was easy enough to hook them up with someone. So the wet nurses played a valuable role in that part of society. The surgeons, that's chirurgi, or I'm sorry, chirurgi. So the GHI is a G sound. And then you had your casalinga, which are your housewives, and your nubila are your babies that are single. So there you have that right there. So if any of you are looking for those, you'll understand a little bit more what they are. Okay, so now, why did they leave Ukraine? Well, first of all, Ukraine's government, Sicily's government was, by then they had done the unification of Sicily and Italy, in 1861, but it did not unify them, all right? If you were Sicilian, the Italian, the Italy, the mainland was taking advantage of you big time over there. Mafia controlled the Italian government, and they still do. Not as bad, but they still do. My cousin can tell you that. In Sicily, the mafia raised taxes and rents on owned and leased land, and then the farmers were forced to pay. And then, they would pay or lose it. And they had started to ask, for favors, and the extortion. That's when the extortion started. They would, need money, or they would need, like I said, a favor, or can you do something for me? So they got desperate, they wanted to save their land. So, it ended up being that by force, they were threatened to take the money. And the Cosa Nostra, it means our thing. They were very much about, this is ours, this is ours. So they were pretty much under the, I help you because you need it, and now I want your money back. I want my money back, pay me now. So it got really rough. The poverty was bad as it was, but there was a lack of operating funds that affected their production of the farms. So it caused farmers their contracts, and guess who was picking up the contract if they couldn't? Somebody in the mainland. So they were slowly taking advantage, not slowly really, but they were taking advantage so much of Sicilians that they couldn't do anything. So they had to what they had to do was work in Messina or Bronte, like my grandfather was doing, in order to survive. They had to leave Ukraine. And that was not, like you saw, it was not a short trip. It took a long time. So they would actually have to leave their families and go live in those places, so that even Messina is far from Ukraine. They have to go live there. So a lot of those things changed their life. So starvation was the biggest. At such a high cost, farmers, they couldn't maintain their land properly. So their farms suffered from soil exhaustion, and they couldn't support the crops anymore. So, and the crops were feeding the people. So they were suffering there, and then you had the overcrowded living. I told you earlier that they lived together because they were poor. And so you had many mouths to feed, and you weren't getting enough food. And then you have these sicknesses that are coming through. To afford expenses, large families, they're under that one roof, and they're doing all they can to keep things together. During the epidemic years on record, you saw deaths galore, and that's because in these big families, the children were passing it to the elders, or vice versa. So you're getting these big death tolls, and it had to do with that. So that's why, I'm picking Korea, but I'm sure it happened a lot of places. but that's why you saw the deterioration that you saw. You go to the next one. So why did they choose America? Okay, why? Well, this is kind of interesting because the steamships, not by then, were not just transporting cargo, okay? Now they could actually transport passengers in 14 to 15 and a half days. So that's pretty good. The shipping industry actually dominated the transatlantic market by then. Okay, so during the American, we're here in America, the Industrial Revolution, word spread about the jobs in America. Who do you think spread the word? The travel industry, right? The shipping industry. Why do you think they did that? Because they wanted people to say, hey, I want to go to America and work. And that's what happened. There were factories and mills, and they would tell them that they need laborers. And don't forget too, they were also working with the companies, the big manufacturing companies. They were saying, you need laborers? I'll get you laborers. So that's what they did. They got the laborers. So their sales pitch was this, okay? The salesmen would say, get your ticket to the land of opportunity and the streets paved in gold. So you're poverty stricken and you hear this and you're thinking, I can get away from this. I can get my family away from this. So this is what they did. So communities, they had to collect funds for each other. They'd have to send one or two people. They collected, a lot of people collected them. And they wanted to know how it was. So they'd send them over. They'd get on the boat healthy, but don't forget, these sicknesses were going around. They'd get on the boat healthy and they'd get sick and get turned away. So now this money that they worked so hard to pull together got wasted. And this happened a lot. You can go to the next one. Okay, so this right here is my grandparents. This is that's them right there. They traveled with just one of their children. Can you imagine that? Picking one child to travel with, and the other one stayed behind for 2 years. So I followed them from Bronte because that's where they were living, and they were married and they had the kids, and their son was 6 years old, Carmelo, my Uncle Charlie. He was 6 years old. Now Vita was only 4. Okay, so but she's, like I said, stayed behind. And when I couldn't find her on Manifest, because I didn't know this at all, I couldn't find her, and I was like, wait a minute, I know Vita existed. I know that she's my aunt, and I know she's their daughter. What happened to her? I knew she was born over there. So, but based on what I learned, that they were being turned away, it became a lot more real. There's more, okay? So she did, okay, hold on for 1 second. Go to the next slide, Jeff. Let's talk about that. This is Ellis Island. Yeah, okay, you can. The rotation of travelers by then was, ticket sales were crazy. It was advantageous for the shipping industry, but really it wasn't as advantageous for the passengers. So fares were less to travel in third class and in the ship steerage. And what they did to make up for the less money is they put more in there. So now you're traveling and you're getting sicker and sicker. Okay, so you're getting turned away. So now you've got where in the immigration officials they had to really come down on the foreign diseases getting in there. So that's when Ellis Island came about, because before then they were coming through Boston, all right, to get here, to this area. They were going to major ports before that. So now Ellis Island comes into effect. They're able to do all this for that. Jeff, you can go into the next one. Has anybody been to the Immigration Museum? It's really it was quite an experience, from dropping your bags all the way, then they had to So then they had to climb the stairs, you know, of observation. That was the 30-second physical. And, you know, they were being, don't forget, they just got off a boat after being there for 14 to 15 and a half days. They didn't even have themselves steady yet, and they had to go up these stairs and be examined. And of course, they're pale and they're trying to pinch each other's cheeks to get some blood going to them so they look healthier. And they had to leave their baggage, you know, down there. Some of them had to carry them because they couldn't, you know. You know, what made you understand, it made you really feel, but we're, and that in there is where the benches were that they waited on. The passengers had their number tags, and they waited to stand in line some more so that they could go to the registration areas to the 15 tall desks that were across the hall, you know, from the waiting area. And the officers were waiting there on those tall desks with interpreters for them, which is good that they had the interpreters. That helped a little, but it was still very intimidating for them. Officers questioned every passenger and listened to their answers. They were waiting to hear errors. They were, because the errors were if they contradicted themselves from the answers they gave at the port of departure 14 days earlier. Now, when you couldn't remember everything, you know, and you're exhausted, so they were very judgmental. So the process was intimidating, like I said, and they were already malnutritioned. They ate slop. They ate like animals. They slept like animals. They slept on hay mattresses, you know, in that compartment. So, you know, they were exhausted. Okay, so you can go to the next one. That kind of shows. Okay, so what happened if you didn't get past that question part? You went to say, has anybody experienced the Board of Special Inquiry in their family, on their family records? Do you know what the BSI is? All right, so maybe you've seen this. There's a hearing room that the Board of Special Inquiry would meet with you if you were a passenger, okay? That had what they call an LPC charge. That was called likely a public charge. They worried about you, but there was a reason why you were in that boardroom having to explain your story. Okay, so if you find that LPC or BSI in your immigration record, be aware of that there's other pages in the back of the manifest that have those. So you want to go to the very back. You know how you see pages and pages? Go to the very back pages, and a lot of times you'll see on the record where they get, you know, when they're, it's admitted. There's a stamp admitted. So in other words, by their names, it'll say admitted if they got admitted, or it will say denied. All right. So if you see that, then you go to the back of the book, and that'll help figure that out. So now, getting back to this, if they didn't pass, all right, you see these stairs right here. These are called the stairs of separation. The middle went past and going into the gates of America. The other ones went to the ships that took them there. So here they came, they you know, were on this voyage for 14 to 15 days, and now they got to go back and do the same thing again if you got denied. So I think, honestly, okay, I'll tell you this, my aunt and her uncle came over here. This is how Vida got over with her uncle. And I think the reason they didn't take Vida is because they were worried about her, that she wouldn't make it across, because if the child got denied, the parent had to go back, or one of the parents had to go back. So here you are facing this part. So they couldn't risk it, okay? So, where are we now? I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything important. So, let's take,
This is the,
yeah, let's take Vita. This is her, this is the ship they came in, and then the next, and this is her manifest page. Okay, so you'll see on the manifest page, can you see the admitted from here?
no,
Can't see. Can't
it's
see.
okay, just this one.
Anyway, so she's with her uncle. I'm gonna find, here's Vita Ferro. Yes, see the admitted. See right here, there's a stamp,
Where's your-
right above the numbers, yeah. So, here's his name. Right here, Vita Ferro. Over is Luca. Ferro, Vincenzo Luca, that is Angelina's brother. So they, right there, you can see a stamp. It would be clearer if you could actually see the record. It says admitted. So I wondered, what did that mean? So I did a little bit of research and I asked my friend, my woman there, Rhonda, and she told me, go ahead and look in the back. And that's where I found them. So I found the, go ahead to the next one, John. So this was what they got. This was a detainment. This wasn't
Wait,
theirs
wait.
because I didn't have theirs, but this was their detainment card. I told them that they had to stay. Vincenzo had to go to the BSI, you know, to hear is, don't forget, child trafficking was big then, okay? So they were worried for Vita. They were worried for her. So Vincenzo had to prove that he was her uncle. The reason this was a problem was because Vita was giving different answers than Vincenzo. They asked her, how old are you? Okay, she said 6. Vincenzo said she was 5. You know what I'm saying? So there were too many, and they didn't look alike. She was more blondish, he was very dark, different complexions. So all of these things were registering in their minds. So this is why Vincenzo had to go. Took them 3 days being in Ellis Island for her mother or parents, I'm believing it's her mother, because her father didn't speak very good English. So they had to get a letter, a telegram off to them, 3 days for them. They had to, and of course, they don't leave the island in those 3 days. They're there and they're, you know, they're staying in dormitories. So, and separated because, you know, he can't be trusted yet. So somebody else, a perfect stranger, is taking care of Vita, which happened on the ship anyway, because they were not family. I mean, they were, you know, he was not the dad. So he had to be with the single males, you know, the males over this side. The families were in the middle of both, and she's over here and has to be with another woman, you know, who's taking care of her that she doesn't even know. So she was already used to that. And again, you don't know these things until you look at the records and you say, yep, something's up with that. So that's what happened there. Okay, so I also found passengers from Ukria who were denied entry. Does anybody know a Sardi, last name Sardi?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Antonino Sardi was hospitalized on Ellis Island. Now, you can go look at his record. You can go look at his record. Who's the Sardi?
Uncle Tony. Uncle Tony went to live at my aunt's house when he came over here.
Yeah, so, they could be, you never know, believe me, I'm sure there were a ton of Antonino Sardis, but one of them was hospitalized on Ellis Island. Now, I don't know if he was ill and had to stay, or if they sent him back, or if he got better and they let him go. So, you know, a lot of times what happened there is they had the hospital, on Ellis Island. And if you were going through that physical and then they had to pull you aside because you didn't look well or you had one of those bad diseases, they immediately brought you underground. Jeff and I took the hard hat tour on the ground. What an eye-opening experience that was. If you've ever got a chance to do it, please do. Plan on going there for a day to do all of it. But did you do the underground? Oh my goodness, you learned so much. These people who came to America for freedom could not see, all they could do is see the Statue of Liberty from the window of the hospital rooms. They couldn't leave the hospital, they were dying. They had to stay there and die. They couldn't send them back because they would just spread more disease. So they died in that hospital right there, coming here to America. Now they could have been perfectly healthy and ended up getting something when, you know, from the travel. So many things didn't work out for so many of them, you know, and you say, you look at yours that made it and you say how fortunate they were. And it's crazy how fortunate they were, right? You count your blessings. You know, we were saying earlier, who was talking with me earlier about that? Like, you know, they didn't understand. They came here not speaking the language or anything. It didn't bother them at all. You know, here I want to go to their country. I'm learning their language so I can go there. You know what I'm saying? But it didn't, they had to get out. That was their desperation. They had to get out. So it didn't matter what they couldn't do. They were going to figure out how to do it. They did it. They survived. So, so that's, you know, kind of what happened there with Vita, but she ended up joining her family in Waltham. A lot of things happened with her. Vincenzo, he got free from all that, and they both went together. So next one is Jeff. So have you heard of the American Museum in the Little Italy in New York? You know, the little, what's it, on Mulberry Street? Has anyone ever been there? Well, you should try to go because this will tell you a lot about what happened. Once they were accepted through the gateway, all right, that bridged, you know, Ellis Island and the land of opportunity. In American cities, there was backlash. There was a lot of backlash. You had a lot of these men and women from different countries who were living together, you know, but they did eventually separate themselves. Like, you know, you have like Irish Boston and Italian Boston. This is what they did. There was safety in numbers, so they sort of stuck together. And they formed these little Italies to protect Italians. Okay, and Sicilians too, but you know, don't forget, the Northern Italians didn't like the Sicilians either. So they were getting a lot. In fact, there's Black Hand, there's this company called, oh, hold on, before I go to Black Hand. Look at all these little things they had. So they had laborers' work that they could help them get. They, they had protection for them there. There's a midwife. You open that that right there with the midwives. It's all about the births that she, you know, delivered, the children that she delivered, and all the different stories. It's pretty amazing to understand some of the stuff. And they would get paid a chicken. That's what their pay was, like getting a chicken or something like that. But they learned how to live together, you know, and protect each other and open markets. But then, next page, Jeff, there was the Black Hand. Okay, so again, more extortion followed them. All right. So what they used to do was bother the business owners. Regardless of the protection that they were getting, there was still intimidation tactics that were going on. And it was mostly towards like the Sicilians that they would do it. But look at some of this stuff. Can you read it? I mean, it's pretty incredible. This is that letter. This is what this letter says. Yeah, this letter right there. So the Black Hand, you know, look what they would leave them messages to threaten them. And some of their families were still at home. So they would say, we're gonna go get your family, and we're gonna kill them, or we're gonna take your daughter, and, so they're making them afraid, so that they would turn around and go home, or they could get money from them, it was terrible, but they knew that they could take advantage of the Sicilians. They knew it. They did it to some Italians too. Don't forget the Calabrese were also pretty much, anybody who was Southern Italian was, mistreated by the Northerners. Yep. That made me a little sad, because I know a lot of Italians that are Northerners, and I was like, but, it's what happened. Doesn't mean it happens now, but, let's see, next one right there. So this actually, here, the Walthamites, is that what you all call each other, Walthamites, right? So Ucria may have been where like my family tree began, okay, over 200 years ago, but it continued here. This is actually Angelina in the middle. Okay, Giuseppe wasn't alive at this time. This was 1968. This was her, I'm sorry, this is 1964. This was her 80th birthday. And this is my mom right here. And these are all my aunts and uncles, and that's me. Can you believe that I made it into the picture and I wrote this book about it? Is that weird? You talk about bringing this full circle together. So yeah, I thought that was pretty cool.
When Jeannine talks about the 9, that's the 9.
The Ferro 9, yes, I call them the Ferro 9. That's what I always call them. There's other ways of saying Auntie this, da, da, da. So you would I just call them the Ferro 9. So that's them, and they live the rest of their lives here. Out of those 7 Pharaoh clans that I introduced you to earlier, 8 men and 2 women immigrated to Waltham, out of all of them, okay, to Waltham. So they lived the rest of their lives here, all right? And I'm going to tell you a little bit about them. Who were they? Because this is where their stories, well, my grandmother and my grandfather's pretty much. So I'll go on to Salvatore and Carmela. The family lore says that they married on a ship, but they couldn't have, because she didn't come over with him. So they couldn't have married on a ship, but it's family lore for them. He is my grandfather's brother, okay? So, but he did very well coming over here. He ran a grocery market at 101 Fountain Street. Are you familiar with the address? Does anybody live there? Does anyone live there? Or know anyone that does? 99 Fountain Street was the house, and 101 was his grocery store. So he did very well to sort of get himself going, okay? The next ones after them, Carmelo and Carmela Castorina. Now, the last name in parentheses is hers, and she, right there, was from Floresta, but they were engaged, okay? So I didn't find Carmelo Ferro until they got to Waltham and they got married. I didn't find, I'm sorry, I found a ship's manifest with his name on it, but I had no idea who he was yet, because that doesn't give you that much information, okay? But then I find their marriage record in a city record, and that was the way that I knew that he and my grandfather were brothers, because on it they had the same parents' names. Yeah. So otherwise I would have never known. So that's why it's important to not give up on someone. Keep looking at all the records, because you'll find the clue. The clues are in there. You will find them. But I've never found his birth certificate or his death certificate. And actually, they ended up leaving Waltham. They had 2 children, and one of them died. So after that, they left. Sebastiano he's the next one. He was also a brother to Giuseppe and Salvatore and Carmelo. He was single. He was a bird of passage, they call them, when they keep going back and forth, back and forth. He never really stayed here, and he died in Korea, but he did come back enough, to be in records. Signorino and Rosalia Mancuso. Okay, so this one, Rosalia came over with her daughter, Rosaria. Her daughter was only a year old. And she traveled alone. Well, I'm sorry, she didn't travel alone. She actually traveled with one of the cousins, which I'll introduce him in a minute. So she traveled with him and her daughter to get across, because women at the time could not travel alone. They couldn't travel alone. It was too dangerous for them. Some of them did dare it, but they weren't supposed to. They would say they were going with somebody, and then somebody would get lost somewhere, some minion. So, but what happened here is Rosalia's and Signorino's granddaughter, Doreen from New York, reached out to me through Ancestry to share some of the stories for me to add to the book, because I was doing research also on Ancestry by this time, because I'm in Waltham, and they'll have all those records. So she caught me on Ancestry, and so she said, I was kind of telling them about me doing a book, and I was looking for this and that. So she actually read the book, and I've sent her records like crazy since then that she didn't have from Sicily. So she helped me out, and I helped her out, which was a really great thing. And again, she's in New York, and here we are here in Massachusetts. So it's just nice how community comes together for this kind of stuff. Graziano and Maria Rosario Colantropo are the next ones. Okay, Colantropo is actually in my family name, but I don't know if I'm not sure if she's related to us. He's also Graziano's children Waltham too. From the censuses, couldn't find them, and directories. All of a sudden, here they were here all the time, and then they're gone. So I had gotten to know them so much that I couldn't stop knowing what happened to them. So I actually extended my search and found them in New York. I actually found their daughter's records in New York, and they are under the aliases that Graziano and Maria Rosaria in New York took the names John and Rose. But I was able to, through a daughter, find them. So, you gotta use every access you can use to get those records. I mean, and it's good that I did all that research on the children, because if I didn't, I wouldn't have found them. So it was kind of interesting to see that. And Tonino and Maria Mancuso. Oh, this is another interesting. They're all interesting stories because it's stuff that you could not even imagine. She called herself Mrs. Mary. Okay, that's how we knew her, Mrs. Mary. He's Signorino's and Graziano's brother, just so you know. All right. She's no relation to Rosalia, though. She actually comes from Pietra Perzia, which is in the Enna region of Sicily. Their great-grandson, Rick, from California, reached out to me after reading my book. He needed his grandfather's birth record to complete his dual citizenship before they moved to Spain. So he reached out to me. I was able to give him those records. So you'll read that Antonio, and that's what he called it. Antonino changed his name to Antonio. He's another one that disappeared from Waltham, and I investigated his disappearance too. And after seeing that his wife took on Mrs. Mary, and she was the HOH of the house, so you're never the head of the household if you are married, usually. So here she's saying, Mrs. Mary, head of household. Did she lose her husband? I thought he died. I thought he died. No. I did find a death certificate on him though, many years later in California. So he left his family, basically. And with that, there was a bill from the funeral home. And on the bill, there was an attachment. There was an attachment from one of his children. She attached a letter. I won't tell you what it said.
To know.
And now we have Vincenzo and Domenica Margherita Scalisi. All right, Scalisi is another name around here. Yeah. She took the name Margarita or Margaret when she got here, but she was Domenica, but Domenica means Sunday. And it just didn't translate here in America. So Vincenzo owned a tailor shop. He came out here first. Margarita stayed behind for 10 years. So without it, they have quite a story. Their son, Antonio, joined them later after Margarita came out here. Their son joined them too. They had lost a son, and Vincenzo wasn't even home during the time they lost that first son. So this one's kind of a heart-wrenching story because there was a lot of him just trying to get ahead, and after he loses a son, what are they thinking? I can't have that happen to me again. I gotta make this work. So, you know, they didn't see each other for 10 years, he and his wife, and his, you know, it was a rough story for him and her too. But you know, I get it from the Ferro end, you know. And then their son actually, he had his naturalization paperwork in, and they had to rush it through because the son was in boot camp at the time, getting ready to fight World War II, and he wanted to fight. And it turns out that their son Antonio ended up losing an eye in World War II, but well, he did get his naturalization paperwork in. After the war, Antonio had married one of the nurses that was there, and the family, he and his parents and she, moved to California. And that's after Vincenzo retired from his tailor shop. Both he and Margarita were laid to rest in Santa Clara, California. So that was, again, another couple that, you know, I couldn't unleash myself from after I got to know them. His story of determination, I think, is really what, you know, they had a love that will definitely play on your heartstrings for sure. At least it played on mine. And he had a desperation to make it work, and you know, they did okay. But it's amazing how life springs off of these pages, you know, so it's good to know all the details, as many as you can get. You know, you gotta pay attention to the circumstances around them too. Like, for instance, she came over just as the Great Depression, you know, as the stock market crashed and the Great Depression started. That's when she came. It was like, really? You pick now? So they had a lot of sacrifice that they went through. Let's see. And also this Vincenzo, he's the one that accompanied Signorino and Rosalia's daughter, Rosa. And so he's the one that accompanied them so that they wouldn't be alone. The daughter was only one. And I ended up finding out from, you know, from her her great-granddaughter, that they ended up calling Rosaria Sarah. That's what a school teacher, she told me the story, a school teacher told her, you should name yourself Sarah. It's more American. So she did, and she was Sarah for the rest of her life. Kind of crazy. Felipa and Antonio Rigoli. Okay, so Antonio Rigoli happened to be a stepson of my two-time great uncle Vincenzo. He married the mother, Antonio's mother. So he was a stepson to him. And the great-granddaughter-in-law reached out to me, Carrier Gold from Vermont. Okay, so I'm getting these people from all over the place. It's kind of cool. She reached out to me after reading the book. She explained that she'd lost her husband, Michael, who was the father of her children. Their daughter was only 6 when he died. Now, I know what that's like because I lost my grandmother when I was 6 and I don't even know her. So she really needed the paternal ancestry records and things like that. And I shared with her the records that I had for Philippa. Now, Philippa, I was able to pass those on. Philippa's journey was she was married. She traveled by her house herself to join her husband, and the women did not, like I said, travel alone. So she was brave. And then her sister, also Vincenza Ferro, Moriarty Santo. What does that tell you? She had a few names. Okay, so she came over as Vincenzo Ferro. She married here. All right, she's Philippa's sister. She was the first Pharaoh that I saw get a divorce, okay? So she realized she, probably was not in the right relationship with the guy she married here, somebody that she worked with, and she ended up getting a divorce. She's the first one. Because they didn't do divorces, don't forget, in Italy, and for a long time, that's in the 70s. Can you believe that? In the 1970s, you couldn't get a divorce. So you're pretty much stuck. If it didn't work out, too bad. So she did that, and then she ended up remarrying, and she married somebody from Hungary. How you like that? This other guy, the first guy, wasn't from Hungary. So that'll tell you something, right? Your homeland people, you know them, right? All right. Go to the next one. This is just some of the photos of those people I mentioned to you contributed. That's Signorino Ferro and his wife Rosalia, later in their life. Down here is Philippa. That is actually on her naturalization paperwork, because you had to put your picture in. And then this family here is Salvatore's family. This is Salvatore here, my grandfather's brother, and this is his wife, Carmela Biondo. So does anybody know the Biondo name? And this is their whole family. They have a big family, right?
Does that look like Sally?
Yeah. Who does he look like? Oh, it's Uncle Charlie. Yeah. I know, right? And you know what? Yeah, I always thought Uncle Charlie looked like Nana, but guess not.
Which one was he?
But that's not him.
Oh, it's not him.
No, it's not, but it looks like.
This is Sebastiano Ferro. This is the only picture we have of him. He was the one I told you that would come and go, the bird of passage. And then this is also Salvatore and Carmela years later. So I thought it was kind of nice that people reached, being pictures, all that. So why did the appraiser choose Waltham? Let's do that. Okay, so why? We all know this answer, right? Jobs. All right, that's what got them here. So Waltham began as a small settlement, but by the 1890s, world renowned for its reputable manufacturing companies, factories and mills along the Charles River. All of this sounded good to them. They came, they made the move. Waltham was a big contributor to the American Industrial Revolution, as we all know that. It was the center of the labor movement, and it was easily accessible from the Port of Boston. And at the time, that's how they got here at first. But then they just kept coming this way. So the next slide is, this is the Boston Manufacturing Company, the cotton mill, 1830 it was built. And it made Waltham the center of the textile manufacturing. It was the first mill to integrate the entire manufacturing process of raw cotton to finished cloth. I think we know that. Under one roof, which is pretty amazing because you have all these companies here, there, and everywhere. Of course, they got the cotton from the south. They really couldn't do much here about that. The Boston Manufacturing Company built the Sacred Heart Church for the Italian employees. And I don't know if anyone knew that. The watch factory, the next one, Joe. The watch factory, known for precision watchmaking. The company transported immigrant laborers from the Port of Boston. They actually had little stagecoaches that got on there. And they would deliver them like right to the door. So they were, and Waltham's popularity grew. It grew its population. The popularity is what made the population rise. Tiny Edenville, remember when Waltham was called Edenville way back, okay? So that little Edenville of the past became the watch city. So, and the reason they did that is because the watch factory had contributed so much to the consistent amount of laborers that were coming in, so they gave them that credit. Next one. Italians were the vital source of the labor supply, especially in Massachusetts mills. According to my grandfather's, your father's, according to Uncle Sal's birth record, my grandfather worked for the Bleachery and Dye Works in 1917. So that was pretty cool to find out that. Big companies hired labor brokers called padroni. Does anybody know this story? So padroni were usually immigrants that had settled into the American fold by then. So they would help new arrivals find jobs, find rooms to, in boarding houses, and even help settle their families, the new families when they came in. Padronis, it means masters or managers in Italian. So really, they were the helpers to do a lot of this stuff. Sicilian neighborhood streets. Take a look at those streets and tell me if you recognize anything. I'm sure you do. This was, our little, Italy. All these streets were our little Italy. And these were the popular boarding houses that were coming into the addresses of them. Has anybody got an address like that? So these were, how they started. They got these little boarding houses, and then my grandfather's family alone moved to 14 different rentals before they actually bought a home. And they bought a home, I believe, through the help of my Uncle Charlie, because he was quite a generous guy. So these were the most common. I'm sure there's other ones, but these are the most common that I found. And I got these off of the records, off of the manifest, the ship manifest, says where they're going. So what I did was I kept making for everything, births, deaths, marriages, I made these charts. And on the charts were when they got here, where they went. So I was able to piece everything together. They're all sitting in that laptop. So I figured it all out. I did go to see the houses, or I tried to see a lot of the houses that our family, Sally, lived in. Some of them I couldn't find though. So have you seen them all? No. It's kind of interesting. So not kind of, very interesting. So going to the next one. So Ferro business owners, okay? So Salvatore had his grocery market, I told you that, 101 Fountain Street. Vincenzo had his tailor shop. Those started very early in their lives. 1917. Vincenzo had moved. 1917 moved. 1923 he moves. He's moving his shop all those times. 1927. And his wife isn't even over here yet. He's moving even more. And then he retires. So from 1934 to 1945, he was on School Street. So that was the longest the longest he stayed, and then he retired, and then we had Charlie's Barber Shop. That was actually the Charlie that is Salvatore's oldest son, the baby that you saw on your lap. That was Charles. So he had a barber shop. Does anybody know it? Do you remember? Does anyone know? 855 Main Street. Was there for a while. And then that family, his little family, moved to Weston, Mass. And they were a little troublesome. Right, Sally? Yep. Yeah, they got in a lot of trouble, that little family. So, Johnny's Texaco was my uncle Johnny, one of Giuseppe and Angelina's children. And he, at 760 Moody Street, anybody know of it? 1950 to 1964, do you remember it?
Across from the funeral.
Hmm?
You know, the building's still there.
You'll see it.
Yeah.
You'll see a picture of it in a little bit. And then J&J Variety was owned by another one of Salvatore's kids. See, Salvatore was a good example for his children, because he showed them, this is what you do to get, this is what you do. And then he was, I think, even Giuseppe was an example like that. My Uncle Sal, for instance, he wanted to do better than his father. He saw that his father really, he couldn't get himself together. He's not one of them that was very successful here. So I think that, like, you're seeing that this is Salvatore's son, or not son, grandson, right? Yeah, grandson. This is my Uncle Charlie, your grandfather. This is his business. He had an interior paint service. From 58, and it's still 64, I lost track of him from there, so the research kind of stopped right there for him. Sal's Lunch was another one of Salvatore's descendants, had this one in 1962. Charlie's, another one of Salvatore's descendants, again. And then you have my Uncle Sal right here, Sally's father, and he opened up his lawnmower service on 185 Newton Street. You gotta know him. You know him. And sweetest guy. And he actually, he started at 64, and he actually died, but his son Joey kept the business going until 2019. So it was a long time, but he was a real dedicated person, dedicated businessman, and he did a lot too for the family, And the next one. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about the registration record and how I figured out this was my grandfather, even though it says Ferry. This happened a lot. You gotta, look at the ending links, but plus my grandfather didn't speak well. So you couldn't really understand him when he spoke. So, they had to figure it out. 59 Felton Street. I hadn't heard of this address, all right, yet. So I wasn't sure it was him because it said Ferry, all right? But, I looked, October 1873. He wasn't born in 1873. He was born in 1875. Why did they have 73? So that made me like, maybe this isn't him. But then I go all the way down here to his wife's name, Angelina Luca Ferri. So how often is a Giuseppe Ferri married to an Angelina Luca, is the same one that my grandfather's married to. So it told me a lot. And then to prove it, I found my Auntie Rose's birth record, and she was born at 59 Felton Street. So that was the cement that pulled that all together for me. But again, so a record isn't exactly right. You save it anyway if you sort of think maybe, because that was it for me. There was no way anybody was going to convince me it wasn't him.
You knew he couldn't sign his name and how
Right, and right down here, he couldn't write, so he had to do an X, and they signed it for him. So, to me, that tells so much. just about his life here. And I didn't know he worked for the Mexico. So that was good that I found that out. You know, there's things you decipher from all the records, so I thought that was an interesting one, because it did fool me. All right, and then this right here is the Westboro State Hospital. This is the Coffee Building. My grandfather actually ended up in actually they used to call them asylums back then. So that story opened wide for me when I got his records from the asylum. And he is actually, you know, it was the Depression, Great Depression, but while the Depression was going on, he was going through his own depression. So he ended up here, and he, you know, they had to evaluate him. He did do a lot of coming home, but he was still part of the, you know, he was just an outpatient. He did go back, you know, he did come home. And then I had to get permission when I found out that these records were there, because this is the type of person I am. So I learned this stuff and I can't just put it to sleep. Like, oh, that's nice. I have to find out where are the records. Now, we're talking, when I called them, the woman's name, Bridget Kearney, okay? I called her and she told me the process to go through, but she said, before you even do that, honey, I don't think we have the records. She says, this was over 50 years ago at the time, and they only keep records for 25 years and then they burn them, which is crazy. I think they still do things like that, but it's kind of crazy because you do have people later on who come, you know, descendants that might need those records. So anyway, she thinks she got the records were gone, but she said, you know what? I have a vault in the back that I need to go through. It's all old records. I'll go through that and I'll let you know. So she said, but don't get your hopes up, you know? So she said, you know, and then I would call her. She said, just call me. And then I would call her and she'd say, yeah, I haven't got to it yet. So I kind of thought I was one of those people she was just sort of trying to satisfy. You know, very nice woman talking to her, but you know, you don't know what they say when you get off the phone. So I'm thinking, okay, probably nothing's going to happen from this, washing my hands of it. So I tried one more time and she said, you're not going to believe this, but I found my grandfather's records. And he wasn't just at that hospital. He was at the Metropolitan State Hospital in Waltham. And I have those records. I got every single transcript that the therapists wrote. And I found out, I learned, that's where I learned the most about my grandfather, was through those records. Talked about his childhood, because they, you know, the therapists, they pull everything out of you, right? So I learned, I got the closest to him doing that. And it killed me to read some of the stuff. I didn't know this man, but I knew this man after that. And it was probably the biggest turning point for me was, right, Jeff? Yes, Jeff, he would come home and I would be sobbing, like, from reading these records. And, oh, you wouldn't believe what happened to him today. And, oh, it was heartbreaking. And I write about it. I wrote everything. I included everything because, you know, there's a saying that they only lived if you remember them, right? They only lived if you remember them, all right? And I think that was actually, was Jessica Tanzi, said it in the green, fried, yeah, right, fried green tomatoes, is that it? Yeah, yep, they only lived if you remember them. They only lived if you remember them. So, yeah, that's what I felt like I needed to do for him. I needed to, you know, I needed to do that. So that's what happened there. Go to the next one. This is my Aunt Nancy, and today is her birthday. And she was a 50-year employee for Raytheon. It was her only job. This is her 25th anniversary. She is right up here. Yeah, I know you can't see it from here, I can pass it around, but this was the 25th anniversary. So I remember her 50th and going to it. And they gave her a rocking chair and a gold watch after 50 years of work. But, you know, she was a pretty dedicated employee. She was a lifelong resident of Waltham. And, you know, I would always go visit her when I worked near here. She used to make me soup. So I wanted to honor her today. Oh, it would be her 107th birthday. So I wanted to honor her. You know, these people, they don't go away, you know, from you. They stay in your heart and you celebrate them as much as you can. And I did that doing this book a lot. I spent so much time with them again, which, you know, it was really something that I needed. So this book was, like I said before, a labor of love for sure. This right here is my Uncle Charlie's naturalization paperwork. I was so proud of him that he naturalized. Vita did not naturalize, but he did, and it took 3 years. He started it in 34, and it wasn't in his file. This was the Declaration of Intention, and then he ended up in 37, actually, you know, fulfilling it all. So it took a while for them to do this, but I was really proud of him. When I saw that, he was, you know, a pretty cool uncle. Right, Sally? Right. And so going, this one right here is the World War II old man's draft. Okay, so there's no Giuseppe here. He was too old. Or I think it's because it had a lot to do with the hospitalization at that point. But this was Vincenzo Ferro and Antonio Bergoli and Salvatore Ferro. Of course, they were too old to go, but that's what they did. They needed them just in case, so they had to go through the draft too. Next one, Jeff. That is World War II, and these are the younger people. We had 18 Ferro soldiers in World War II. 18 of them were in, and now it was really hard because guess who they fought? They fought Italy. So, you know, here we are, their parents, I mean, they're the children of the people who used to live in Sicily, in Italy, and so it was really conflicting for them. You know, they're fighting against their old country, their old home. So that was really conflicting. But so there's that. So and this right here is, don't forget, during World War II, they started doing the. They were, you know, a lot was going on there as far as they were putting them in concentration camps and they. I'm sorry, not internment camps. Sorry. They were putting them, I mean, they were making them, well, we were enemies here. And if you were an unregistered alien, which she was, because she never did hers, and a lot of the women did in the Ferro family, I have them, but she didn't. So they had to have a registration card, and they went through, you know, they had curfews, but when they had the registration card, it protected them somewhat. So she got hers. You know, even though that they were longtime residents here, still aliens, it didn't matter. When the war broke out, they felt like you were the enemy. So that's what they did there. And then this is the Metropolitan State Hospital. Again, this is around the time here that my grandfather bout started again. This one lasted the rest of his life. So he was back and forth again, mostly there though, especially in the end, they wouldn't take him out anymore. All of that story is in there. It's heartbreaking, but it's in there. And these people right here, you're gonna start to see just.
Oh, I forgot.
These are my role models, all of them. Uncle Sal, Uncle Johnny, opened up the Texaco. You recognize it?
Yeah, it's a lot now.
Yes. Do you recognize Uncle Sal? Go ahead, Jeff, you can go with this. So, this is Jeff and Angelina when they're over. This is the grandmother I remember at 6 years old. That's it though, really, that's all. And she sat in the same booth.
They all did.
Right? And she was kind of ornery. I was afraid of her. So, that's all I remember about that. And then, so these are my role models, and this is the reason I do what I do. And, you know, I set out to learn about my grandparents, and I did that. But I also, while doing this, I also got to have all of these people back in my life. Just because I was finding out what they were doing back then and bringing them back to life. And like I told you before, I was the one who ended up with this picture. Kind of ironic. So there you have it. Those are my next one. There's another one. That's again older. Yeah, that's older. This is my godmother and Sally's too. Lena or Mimi. Her name is Mimi. That's my dad. He used to sing everybody. They were the most fun people. Taught us so much about at my wedding. And then this is Uncle Sal here. My mother Sally had one. My mom and Auntie Gray and Auntie Nan. So, and then here they are when Vita is older, visiting her in the nursing home. So they were really connected, really close. They kept us all connected, all close for the longest time. I miss that. You know, big families changed a lot since then. But you have to realize that they were a big influence in our lives. And when you, without them, it's like, okay, who's going to keep the party on? Who's going to keep, you know, everybody connected? So, you know, our family is a little bit at a standstill with that, but I guess it happens, right? Doesn't it happen? Yeah. So here you have it. There's Uncle Sal. This is his first his first accordion he ever had. He got it 1939, right? It was 36 or 39. I forget now. It's in the book. But he used to do a Jimmy Durante skit. Perform a Jimmy Durante skit. He also worked at Brandeis University at that time, right? The next one, and this is Uncle John. He was honorary inductee to Waltham High School athletic. He used to go to all the games, didn't miss one. Then this is him singing My Mammy at Angelina's birthday, 80th birthday. So there you have it. If anybody wants to purchase the book, today I do a participants discount. It's for today only. If people online want to purchase, I'll honor it too, since they were here for the session. If you order it, no, don't order it online because you'll pay the price. You'll pay the full price. But if you send me a check or a money order, I will mail you the book, and you, the hardcover is $25, the paperback is $20, and it's the direct sales, like I said, do not discount, so don't go through that. I can do this because it's mine, and there's no cut taken out of me, so I can give you the discount. And the sales are final and no refunds. That's about it.